As we look back today on the sacrifices Canadian soldiers have made in conflicts past and present all over the world, we turn our attention to a Canadian town, the site of the only battle in the Second World War that was fought on Canadian soil. It centers on a little-known prisoner of war camp in Bowmanville, Ontario, which held high-ranking German officers and an infamous U-boat captain. Our producer, Michael Hiscox, visited the camp to help bring its story to light.
1941. The world is in the throes of the Second World War. As the number of Germans captured in battle grows, the Allies look to Canada as a place to hold prisoners of war.
The POW camps in Europe were becoming overfilled, and a lot of them were too close to the war theater, and so there was a movement to bring them to Canada so they'd be as far away as possible.
Among the camps they sent them to was this one, a former boys' school near Bowmanville, Ontario, but it became known as Camp 30. You're looking at the site of the only battle in the Second World War fought on Canadian soil.
They actually had the highest-ranking German officials here. Everyone knows about the Dieppe raids and how unsuccessful they were. Following that, there were German POWs that were found dead and shackled. And there was a call to shackle Canadian prisoners in POW camps in Europe. The Allies weren't too happy with that either, so they asked for upwards to 100 POWs to be shackled in Canadian prisoners' camps. And here, because we had the highest ranking German officials, they wanted a particular spotlight on Camp 30. When the POWs were here, it was standard practice for them to run their own camp, basically, and as long as they stayed inside the barriers, they had their hierarchy, they had their assignments, they had meetings, and they decided there was no way they were going to cooperate with this order.
The German prisoners barricaded themselves into buildings across Camp 30, and the Battle of Bowmanville began.
The Canadian Guards felt that it had to be a fair fight. The prisoners didn't have traditional weapons of any kind, and so they used hockey sticks and baseball bats and jars of jam and bricks. And so the Canadians used the same weaponry. 3 days in, they called for some backups from Kingston and Trenton area, some new recruits. Those guys came and rappelled into the building through these windows in the roof lines.
Repelled into the building?
Yeah, and that's how they got control of the battle. There's a book written about it, including one of the officials at the end saying, "Nice fight, wasn't it, guys?" And then they went back to the regular day time routines of the camp, except that because they were able to take back control of the buildings, they did shackle and do roll call every morning. But there's also a lovely story that goes with that, if it can be lovely. The guards, who got to know the prisoners quite well over the years, dropped the keys in the grass so that they could undo the shackles and get on with their day.
So the only battle in the Second World War that was fought on Canadian soil was fought with hockey sticks and ended kind of amicably.
Pretty much.
These buildings survived the Second World War, but they might not survive the years ahead. Right now, an assessment is underway to determine what options are on the table to restore them, but their fate might come down to the size of that price tag.
In May of this year, there was a bit of a collapse of part of the roof here, and so that heightened the concerns about what was going to happen with the buildings. Because of breaches of the building and the liability concerns and so forth, it's always been a bit of an anxious situation. Council asked for a heritage impact assessment to be done, hired a company to do that. Council had asked them, other than full restoration, what options might we have to recognize the history and use the resource or not. Out of those options, one of them, about the fourth of 5 options, was, of course, you could demolish the building. There was a meeting a week ago where we were given the go-ahead again to continue with the assessment of the building, and hopefully the numbers will be encouraging. We'd love to have it a community hub for lots and lots of people to use, and in lots of capacities. And so we see sort of stages of use depending on where we are in terms of the refurbishment. If it gets fully restored on the outside, someone like a craft brewery could lease it. He said you can have signs, but a lot of people walk by signs. But if you can stand inside a building like this, you actually become enthralled with the place and you engage with the history, and that's an important part of it.
And producer Michael Hiscox is in studio with us now. Mike, what a fascinating story. First of all, I had no idea it existed and that it's still around. But also that story about how this battle is fought with German officers and they call in recruits from Kingston that repel in because they're fighting with hockey. I mean, the whole thing is an incredible story to be thinking about, especially on November 11th. Marilyn at one point said something I thought was interesting, that the prisoners were running this camp themselves. I mean, you had this great shot of them. They had a band at the camp. Why would something like that be allowed?
Yeah, so it's hard to believe something like that would happen, but there were actually a number of Germans who were inmates there who after the war wrote about their experiences, and so we know this stuff checks out. And so what ultimately happened was a lot of the guards who were overseeing the camp on the Canadian side were veterans of the First World War. They weren't particularly keen on recreating a brutal environment that they endured themselves. The second part was at this particular camp, the Geneva Convention was taken very seriously. And so you really do have this situation where the Germans have the lay of the land. I mean, they perform in theater productions, they're taking educational courses, they can use all of the amenities available, the tennis courts, hockey rinks, boxing rings, swimming pool, you name it. And so you have this unusual situation where even though the inmates are treated well, there is a recognition on their part that they are still soldiers, this is still a war, and they still have a job to do. And so escape attempts were still pretty frequent. And in one case, one guy was able to get out and he made it near to Oshawa, where there's a military base, and attempted to steal a plane before he got caught. But the most interesting escape attempt that I think I read about involved a man named Otto Kretschmer. And he is the most terrifying U-boat captain that Nazi Germany ever produced. He sank more Allied tonnage than anybody else over the course of the war.
Wow.
And because when the Allies got him, because he was so successful at sea, the Germans really wanted him back. And so they devised this strategy, the inmates at the camp. They were going to dig 3 tunnels to get him out. 2 of them were diversions, and then 1 of them was the real deal. The plot did go a bit awry because as they were digging the tunnels, they were storing all of the dirt in the roof. And then there was a day when the roof collapsed. And so the guards found tunnel number 1. And then tunnel number 2, what happened was there was an inmate outside gardening, as one would do at a POW camp.
Yeah.
And as he was digging a hole for his flower bed, he was unknowingly digging on top of a tunnel. And so the floor actually gave out beneath him, and the guards found him sitting in tunnel number 2. So Otto never got out, but this story speaks to the caliber of inmate that was being housed at Camp 30.
And also chilling when you look at some of those photographs and you realize these are high-ranking German soldiers, and you put that into the context of what was happening in Germany in World War II. Listen, the city of Clarington owns that site the cafeteria building is on, and they're working, as Marilyn said, they're trying to figure out what to do with it. So what is the future there?
So there's 2 sides to what's going on. The building, as you said, where the Battle of Bowmanville was fought, is owned by Clarington. They're doing an assessment right now to determine how viable a restoration project would be relative to a demolition. At the same time, the rest of the buildings on the site are owned by a private company called the Catlin Corporation. They've actually agreed to transfer ownership of all those buildings to the city free of charge. The problem is because those buildings have fallen into disrepair, it would cost the city $21 million to inherit and absorb that property. And so really this is coming down to just numbers and price tags. And for what it's worth, the Jury Foundation is trying to collect donations so that they can play a role in saving the site.
Mike, I'm so glad you visited there, that you brought this story to the rest of Canada. Thanks for bringing it here to your morning. I hope this needs to be a movie. So, I mean, this is just a fascinating story. Mike, thanks so much.
Anytime.
If you like that video, make sure to subscribe to the Your Morning YouTube feed, where you can find all kinds of new content posted every weekday morning.